Welcome, everybody, to our Rejuvenation Day session with Beth Chalette, titled Stop and Slow Down, Rejuvenate with Everyday Mindfulness. Beth is a clinical psychologist and a certified yoga instructor who teaches yoga and mindfulness-based meditation both on campus and in the community. And Beth has been very generous with not only leading these sessions through the TLC. Beth has been the author of the Wellness Wednesday messages that have been going out to campus through the Today at Geneseo. And Beth has been also very willing to work with departments, programs, classes, faculty members to adapt yoga and meditation in classroom settings, department settings, what have you. Beth is happy to work with staff and faculty to create specific sessions for the needs of your departments, the needs of your classes, or your pedagogical needs. So with that, I will turn it over to Beth. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave. Absolutely on the adapting and creating programs to meet needs of different departments, different communities on campus. I'm doing a similar program to this one later this afternoon with a student group. I'm very happy to do that. I think in the last presentation like this, one of the things I mentioned was, for me, that is one of the advantages, maybe one of the few, but one of the advantages of Zoom is it actually makes me getting around to different places on campus in a virtual way more accessible and easy for me to do within my clinical schedule because I don't have to plan in time to traveling to departments. So that's been a little bright lining. So as Dave said, my name is Dr. Beth Chalette. I'm the Assistant Director for Counseling Services. I'm a psychologist and a yoga teacher. I've been a psychologist a lot longer. I've been at Geneseo just over 25 years now. Been teaching yoga for about 5 years. When we were on campus, I had a weekly yoga class. In fact, Sue just popped in. She's been to my yoga class on campus. Looking forward to getting back to that. I still teach at a local studio, and I put the link, and Dave just redid it to my YouTube page in the chat. That's something I added at the start of the pandemic as a resource, trying to get more yoga and meditation, mindfulness out there for people. And part of that Wellness Wednesday series is usually a couple short tips if you've read them. And then the last tip is generally a link to one of my videos, something short, the mindfulness, about 10 minutes and similar to what we're going to do at the end of the program today. So I will talk about that, about what the structure of this program is going to look like. Before I get into that, especially since we have a relatively small group today, it's really helpful for me to hear, like, what made you decide to come to this? What made you choose to do Stop and Slow Down on today's Rejuvenation Day? And we don't have to go around to everyone, but anyone who wants to jump in, I would love to hear that.
Well, I think I mentioned to you before, I participated in the SUNY Sales Mindfulness Leadership Meditation and Communication Certificate Program that SUNY did last fall. And I thought it was really great. And I'm just interested in this. And actually, kind of one of the things that I love the most, because it's the easiest for me, is the idea of taking like an intentional pause. And so when I saw the title of this, I thought, this is right up my alley.
Great, thank you, Sue.
That reminds me of one of the other TLC sessions that you had done for us, Beth. I remember you had pause in the title of that one.
Power of the pause.
Power of the pause, yes.
And Dave, you've attended many now, so I'm sure you noticed some of the elements overlap. I always kind of customize them each time, but you know, these strategies, there's plenty of strategies, and yet there's also common threads through them. And so I think there is certainly an advantage to repetition. If you've been to one of these programs with me before, and I believe Beth was a few weeks ago, to be reminded, right? It takes us a while to learn new skills. And I will talk about that in a moment, that mindfulness absolutely is a skill, one that we have to build up and practice over time. I still have to do it. I have to remind myself to pause and step back. I might be better at it in some areas than others, but it's still a learning process for me as well. So before I go on and talk a little bit more about that, does anybody else want to share why they decided to come to the program today? All right. So yeah, this program, we have done Power of the Pause before. I thought that Stop and Slow Down was particularly appropriate for today, given that this is a rejuvenation day. We're part of the goal, I believe, for these days is for us to pause, is for us to slow down. It may seem like there's not as much need to do that during the pandemic, that in some ways the pandemic has slowed things down. We've dropped many of our usual activities. We're not at the same pace. And in other ways, it's been hectic. At least that's how it's been for me. It's still been kind of, it's been very discombobulating. You know, we kind of feel off kilter and unbalanced really for the past year. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I've spent a lot of time this month thinking about things that happened 1 year ago at this point and how chaotic that was. For me, it's settled down from that chaos, but those elements of the unknown and the uncertainty are still there. So slowing down, pausing, and pausing is a chance to check in and just developing and figuring out what we need. And there's this idea of, when we're on autopilot, we just react. And we react, don't have a chance to reflect, pause, and respond. So the response part is a choice. It's choosing how we want to respond. Sometimes it might be the same as our automatic reaction, and other times we might realize, no, I want to go in a different direction. And so that is the advantage of taking the pause. Another analogy I like to use, because I like to use a lot of analogies, is if you imagine yourself going by some beautiful scenery on a train. And the train is whizzing by, and maybe you catch, I'm talking about a fast train, the train is whizzing by, maybe you catch a glimpse of the scenery outside your window, but it's kind of a blur, it's all going by pretty quickly. And then you imagine that instead you're riding your bike along the tracks, and as you slow down, you see a little bit more, you notice a little bit more of your environment. Then picture walking by the tracks. You've slowed yourself down even more. And probably now you stop and look at a flower or appreciate a color or notice something. So the more we slow things down, the more we become aware of our surroundings, the present moment, and are, again, able to decide, make decisions, whether that's a turn, whether that's a change, whether that's even just to stay on course. It's easier for us to make those decisions when we start slowing things down. So how we'll do this program today is we're going to practice a few different types of strategies. And the thing that's going to be a little unique about this program compared to some of the other ones I've done recently is we're going to use an acronym, because I also love acronyms. If you take a program with me, you have to accept a little bit of my goofiness. So we'll use the acronym AGE, and I'll go through that to do 3 different types of strategies, 3 different categories of strategies. And then we're going to finish using the acronym STOP for a little bit of kind of a guided visualization at the end. So we'll probably go into that at about 11:40 or so. And I leave that for the end because we'll stop and pause and take questions before that. So if anyone does have to leave early and can't stay for the 11:40 to 11:45, and that'll be about 8 minutes or so. So anyone who can't stay for that part and has to leave before can feel free to check out at that point, and you'll know when that is. So as I said, these strategies, these skills we're going to learn are based on mindfulness. And for anyone not familiar with mindfulness, the way that I explain it or define it is mindfulness is simply paying attention with intention. So it's making a choice to intentionally direct our attention. And it's doing that in a way that has a sense of curiosity and kindness, a sense of interest in what we're looking at, and almost like a neutral stance, an interested but not a critical stance. So we're not judging, we're not trying to define anything, we're simply being aware of what is and noticing what is around us. The other analogy I'll use is that I said it's a skill. If you imagine, like if you're trying to build up your biceps and you do, you grab a great big weight and do one big curl, and you're like, why am I not bulked up yet? I expected that to make me strong, and it didn't. it sounds silly when it's a bicep curl, but somehow we expect the same thing of ourselves with skills. Like we think, this isn't working for me. I'm not getting it. I'm not good at meditating. I'm not good at mindfulness, when we've tried it a couple times and it hasn't produced the results that we were expecting. This is practice more akin to building up to running a marathon or learning to play a new instrument, taking time to really build up that skill. All right, so that's my little intro. Does anybody have any questions about anything we're going to do, or something they'd like to see in the program, or anything like that? Because I certainly do try to tailor things a little bit to who's in the virtual room. Okay, so we'll start going through some strategies. And as we do the strategy, the first one, your eyes are definitely going to be open. So, and I'm going to be asking you to look around. As we do the other two groups of strategies, I'll let you know as we start. And if you want to go off camera for a few moments, that's fine. At the end, if everybody comes back on camera, I ask just for any feedback or a little bit of a discussion. So I said we were going to use an AGE acronym, and I like using acronyms sometimes really just as a reminder. So if you're thinking like, what did she talk about, when you're on your own, you can maybe remember and call the letters to mind. So the A of the AGE starts with arrive. We're going to start by arriving in wherever we're seated or standing. So start to kind of shift around, whether you're seated or standing, and make sure you feel comfortable and solid at the same time. So maybe your feet flat on the floor, scooch around on your sits bones so that you have a comfortable seat below you, and allow whatever supporting you, chair, couch, could be lying on a bed, whatever is supporting you, feel that as a solid foundation, and the energy of that support lift up in your body tall, but we're not looking at shoulder stiff. We're not at attention, that kind of attention. We're at a mindful attention where our body feels like more at the ready. Okay, I'm ready to be attentive. And yet you're also comfortable. You're feeling comfortable in your seat. So again, shift around it all if something is not comfortable, so that that's not a distraction for you. You can focus. And just kind of notice like where you are. You're in whatever room you're in. You're in this Zoom with the rest of us. We're going to continue this arrival or awareness of the strategies by using our senses. We'll go through a couple of different senses. You can actually use all 5 of this if you're doing it on your own. And I'll say a little bit about that when we talk about the exercise. We're going to start by looking around the room, whatever room you're in. And as you look around, pick out 5 or 10 objects and just simply name them to yourself. So I'll do it out loud. No trick to it. Just looking around, whatever you see, naming it, labeling it to yourself. So cup, computer mouse, notebook, desk, book, photo, calendar, bulletin board, light, another calendar, trash can. I don't know how many that was. I'm going to ask you to do this again, and this time I'm going to make the objects a little bit more noticeable or a little bit more salient by adding an element of color. So choose a color. I like that Corey saw cookies. That's not fair to share that with us. So choose a color. I'm not going to choose a color because you might not have that color. Choose a color that there's a bit of that color around you, like red, green, whatever, and then name objects that are of that color. So I'm going to look for green things. Computer, mouse pad, carpet, card. What else? Tissue box. Magnets. That was maybe about 5 or so that I named. And then if you've shifted from your comfortable seat, come back to your comfortable seat, and we'll explore things with our hearing. So one of the things that you can hear is probably my voice. Allow your attention, your hearing attention, to go a little beyond that and explore what else you hear around you. Now, there's not a lot of sounds around me, although I just heard my stomach growl and I hear the hum of my laptop. And I also heard my garage door open, which means my husband's home from getting his vaccine shot. I don't think I can hear. I'm in my basement, so I can't hear a lot other than my own voice. You might just you're not trying to, it's trying easy, not hard. So if you can't hear anything, that's fine. You could go back to your site, or you can just keep your ears open and notice whether any new sounds come up in the time that you think that you're not hearing anything. I'm glad I'm not the only one with a rumbling stomach. It's almost lunchtime. And we'll just do our touch sense next. I won't do taste and smell. If you're outdoors, sometimes it's easier to get a sense of smell, but those two are sometimes just a little bit harder to discern taste and smell around you. So let's sense touch. We already did touch a little bit with feeling yourself on your chair. So return your attention to that and feel your body resting on your chair. And you might notice specifically which parts of your body can you feel touching your chair wherever you're sitting in, your support. And other types of touch that you can notice is like where your hands are resting, either on your lap or on your desk. Can you feel the touch of your hands? You might feel the touch of your clothes. I'm wearing a sweater. It kind of feels fuzzy on my body, or my hair is long enough that I feel the touch of the hair on the neck. Feel the touch of the earphones, the headphones in my ears. Might be your feet on the floor, or maybe you're wearing fuzzy slippers for all I know. So you might wiggle your feet and feel that. And then as we finish this first exercise, if you do notice anything you can taste or smell, you can simply notice that as well. So maybe you have a scented candle in the background, maybe you have a window open and you notice that spring smell. Maybe you just brushed your teeth recently and you have kind of a toothpaste taste or a coffee taste in your mouth, if you've been having coffee. So that's our arrival phase. That's our first exercise. Before we go on to the next one, I want to talk about that a little bit. Just what was that like? No expectations. What was that like for people to just kind of tune in and notice things around them? Was it easy? Was it challenging? Were you distracted with other things when you were trying to do that? What are your thoughts on that? A quiet group today. You're welcome to put it in the chat too, if that's easier for you. So I'll say a little bit about this. Sue talked about how she liked from the course that she took the idea of pausing. Okay, Donna said she was distracted. Yeah, it can. So it can be easily distracted. The idea of pausing is to find something to re-engage our attention, and then know that being distracted is a normal part of the process. So Don, if you can answer, you can either do it, come on mic, or answer in the chat. When you got distracted, were you able to return yourself to the task? When I said to switch to a different sense or to look around more, were you able to go back to, okay, red things in my room, or round things, or listening to things that you hear? Okay, she was able to go back. Okay, great. That's good news. So being distracted is not wrong. And that's something really important to emphasize when we're doing these mindfulness activities. You, I assume, are all my intelligent colleagues with complex minds. We want ourselves to have thoughts, right? We do not want to make our minds go blank or stop our thoughts. Sometimes we want to kind of get under the chaos of our thoughts. And so another way that you might think about that, and you may have all heard the famous quote, you are the sky, everything else is just the weather. That's Pema Chodron. Or there's the analogy of all this turmoil at the top of the ocean, but kind of a stillness or a settledness underneath. So we're not trying to stop the ocean waves or stop the weather. We're kind of trying to find a little bit of a center place within all of that chaos that goes around us. And sometimes when we're first practicing this mindfulness skill, when we're first strengthening that bicep or mindfulness mind muscle, again and again, we have to direct ourselves from distraction. That is key. That is actually part of the growth of the exercise, because every time you notice, oh, I'm not counting things in my room, I'm thinking about what I have to do later. as soon as you notice that, that's kind of the magic moment, because then you have the choice to, I'm going to just take my attention back to this task. I'm going to take my attention to my 5 senses, and you might even choose one of each sense. One thing I see, one thing I hear, one thing I smell, taste, touch. However you use the senses exercise, your senses are right there with you. It's a way to draw your attention to the present moment, to give your brain an occupation other than the chaos that's swirling around it, and to redirect several times if needed. And often it will be needed, almost always it will be needed, as you learn to strengthen that little bit of bicep, or I keep calling it the bicep, but the mind muscle, obviously. So any other feedback about that initial exercise? Any questions about that?
I was just going to say that I find it a little harder to focus in the Zoom environment, and I don't know if it's, you know, because we've been dealing with a pandemic over the course of the year, because we're doing everything online on our screens. So I have to try a little harder to focus and be aware of when I'm being distracted in this environment.
Yeah, great point, Dave. So in some ways, you know, maybe we have better access to learning these things. Maybe we have more time in our schedule for if the pandemic has freed up some of our responsibilities. And yet the pandemic, no matter what we do, it's this kind of thing out there, right? And I think of it as like anytime you're dealing with a long-term stressor, it's sort of an energy zapping thing in the background. And so giving yourself a little compassion, and compassion is a huge part of mindfulness, is compassion around the idea that there's a big distraction going on around the world that is going to spill into every activity that I do, and maybe make learning a new skill even harder than it would be in a different time frame, a different environment. Okay. And please feel free to put questions in the chat or jump in at any time. So we'll go on to the next exercise, and this is where is the G in the age process. So A was arrive. We kind of arrived in our spots. We had our attention around the room using our senses. G is going to stand for gather. And this time we're going to gather the attention more internally. Now, again, if you'd like to go off camera for a couple minutes while we do this, you're welcome to do that. You don't have to. I'm happy to look at your faces. We're going to turn our attention inside. That could mean eyes closed. That could simply mean softening your gaze, you know, letting your gaze kind of fall to the tip of your nose or ahead of you without really focusing on anything. So eyes closed is never a necessity for meditation or for mindfulness. And in fact, some people just feel sleepy with their eyes closed, and it's more helpful to do like a half lid or even kind of a little softened stare at a blank spot on the wall ahead. So take that moment and start to redirect your attention to yourself, to your body. Now, often in meditation, the attention is directed toward the breath. And when I'm working one-on-one, I certainly do that with people, is use the breath. And if you have used your breath as an object of attention, and that's easy for you to be mindful on the breath, go ahead and take your energy or your attention to your breath and just observe the breath. You don't need to change it or do anything differently. Simply notice the breath as it goes in and out of your body. If that feels difficult, or you'd like to try being in the body more specifically, we're going to look around for other bodily sensations. So the breath is just one, and the movement of the breath is a sensation in your body. We're going to notice what else is there to notice in your body. So maybe return to some of those neutral touch sensations that we already talked about. Feel your feet on the ground, wiggle your toes a bit. Feel where your body is being supported by whatever you're sitting in. So for me, it's the backs of my legs, my hamstrings, my bottom. I can feel the back of my chair and my back against the back of the chair. continue to gather your attention to any other sensations that are there. You might feel a sensation of warmth or coolness. You might feel a sense of energy or more fatigue. There might be even some unpleasantness or pain in the background. Maybe you have a headache. Your fingers are bothering you from typing. Got a little ache in your back or your shoulders. We're taking that all in. We're noticing without getting caught up in any of those sensations. So that train analogy I used in the beginning, you might think of yourself, now you're watching the train as it's whizzing by. You're not jumping on the train. So if you notice on the side of the train, oh, that's my headache. Okay, notice it, be aware of it, be kind of curious. Okay, I've got a headache today. And then go on to searching for a different sensation in your body. And if you notice yourself getting caught up in something, notice yourself getting caught up in thoughts and memories and planning for later. Remember that sense of compassion, like, hey, I noticed I got distracted. Yay, me. That's part of this process. And then gather your attention back to something else in your body. Maybe there's sort of a neutral home point that you stay with. It's easy to bring your attention back to, like your feeling of your hands if they're resting on the tops of your thighs. Or for some, it may be the breath. You can also place your hands lightly over the area of the belly button and feel the movement of the breath in and out. Draw yourself back to that simple sensation of breath movement in the body. And know with each of these sensations that you're noticing or feeling, there's nothing to be done. You don't have to do anything. That is part of our pause process. You can just be here and notice. Nothing is required of you right now. Give yourself permission to simply be here and notice what's going on in your body. As we settle, as we finish this with just a few more moments, see if you can settle your attention on either a more neutral sensation like your feet, or maybe even something that feels sort of pleasant. Maybe at this point, the sensation of your breath feels pleasant, feels nice to you. Allow your attention to rest there, and allowing to rest means drawing it back if it wanders. If any of you have ever trained a puppy, when the puppy, wanders away from the newspaper that you set down for it, you gently draw the puppy back until the puppy gets the sense of what it's supposed to do, right? We do the same with our minds. Gently draw it back. Kindness to ourselves as we gently tell our minds, "Oop, no, not that direction, this direction." And then maybe observe one last breath, one last inhale and exhale, however that looks for you. And if you'd like to come back on camera, you can come back on camera and we'll see how that felt for everyone. So what was that like when we went from the external world to gathering the attention more specifically internally? Easier, harder, very calming. Thank you, Beth. Sue says nice. Sometimes people find it harder to draw their attention inside, and sometimes people find it easier. And part of my goal in giving you multiple strategies, you absolutely don't have to try every one on your own. If you're like, I like that G, I like the gather, you don't have to do the whole AGE, the whole age. You can just stick with the G. Knowing what works for you is also a skill. So knowing that, yeah, that's a good calming strategy, or that's a good distraction strategy for me. we didn't do this fully, but we did like the beginnings of something that's called a body scan. Corey said it's good just to slow down and be at peace for a moment. Great. And great that you gave yourself permission to do that, Corey, to just slow down. And again, that idea of doing nothing. So I was saying that we did the beginnings of what's sometimes called a body scan. I didn't take you through every area of the body. That's how a body scan usually goes, either head to toe or toe to feet. I do it sometimes with my student therapy clients. If that's something that you felt like being in your body was really useful and helpful to you, you could look up body scan on YouTube or look it up on your app list. And there's plenty of videos and guided mindfulness meditations to help with that. And I'm happy to send people suggestions too if they want to look around. If you tell me like a kind of time frame you're looking for, I can poke around and send you some. And I believe one of my older meditations, I did do a body scan, and I could always put that link up too on my YouTube page. All right, any other feedback? We'll go into the last exercise, which is the E part of the age. We'll take a few moments to kind of like wrap things up and take any questions, and then we'll go into the guided visualization to finish. So any questions before we get to that? Okay, so this is the last little bit of practice exercise that you can see how this feels for you. And again, you can be on camera or off. Your eyes can be open or closed for this one. So this part of the age is expand. That's the E of the age. So we arrived in our space. We gathered our attention internally. And now we're going to expand our attention to something specific. What we're going to do in this case is we're going to search in our recent memory, either earlier today or yesterday, try not to go back further than that, for something good. Now that might be something good that happened to you. That might be something that you did well. That might be something that you're grateful for. And we're actually looking specifically for something small. So if you like won some huge award or got a big grant yesterday, that's great. And that's, that probably instantly leapt into your memory. If something bad happened yesterday, that probably also instantly leapt into your memory. So we're kind of searching almost as if we're taking a spotlight and searching around and looking for something small. Like that cup of coffee I had this morning was so good and refreshing. Or I had a good night's sleep last night. Or yesterday it was sunny, and I don't know if it was sunny yesterday, but it was warm. It was beautiful out and I felt good to be outside. So some little thing that was there, that was real, that happened, that maybe you kind of overlooked a little bit in thinking about, especially if I told you to call to mind something and nothing came to mind immediately. And then as you remember that, as you call that to mind, I love that Dave shared. So he saw a bumblebee. That's perfect for going in and out of the crocus. Yeah, and spring is a really good time to observe these little things. If you have an appreciation of nature, it's really easy to get out and start noticing some of these little things. I taught yoga in Fairport, which is right on the canal, and I took a moment to walk along the canal after I was finished because it was warm and things were starting to grow, and it just felt good. And feel as you notice yourself remembering this and noticing that, notice what's going on in your body. Like when you called that to mind, did you have a smile? And I'm smiling even as I read that Sue talked with a good friend who moved. Like that brings a smile to my face as I see that. As you think about that, the bumblebee, your friend, do you feel anything else in your body? Maybe a sense of warmth in your belly. Beth had her son called and coming to visit, which is always exciting. Maybe you feel a little sense of a release in your shoulders. You didn't even realize you were holding your shoulders. And when you think that memory, your posture shifts or changes. Donna Saul Robbins, yeah, they've been around. I love the return of the mourning doves. So engaging my sound. I love hearing them in the background. And I heard the rain last night too, which was also kind of nice. So we're just going to stay for a few more moments, staying with the same thing. You don't have to switch to a different memory, but kind of it's sort of the process of savoring, like, as if you were tasting something, a piece of chocolate, a savory food, a salty potato chip, and you just took a moment to savor the taste of that in your mouth. It's savoring that pleasant experience or memory. The black-capped chickadee. I don't know if I would be able to identify that with a sing-song whistle. I can identify the mourning dove, and I used to be able to identify cardinals when they were common around us, but I don't know if I could do that still. All right, and then you can come back on camera if you like, and we'll spend the last few minutes talking about this exercise before we wrap things up. So what was that like for you? Was it easy to call something out? I think almost everybody put something in the chat that they called to mind. Was it easy to find that little memory in your brain? Did you have to really kind of go to a bigger spotlight and search around for it? What was that like?
Very easy. I haven't seen that family since Christmas.
So for you, and so that might have been, so Beth, that for you, that might have actually been kind of like a big thing, even though,
it can be a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it was a big thing, which is great. I mean, it was great that it's right there and it's easy to remember, and it was a big thing, and that's perfect. Later, if you're doing this on your own, you might kind of search your mind and say, all right, well, what else? That was big and that was great. What small things were good yesterday or today?
The sound of his voice.
The sound of his voice. Yeah. So within that big thing, a small thing. I love that. Yeah, great. Yeah, so within, and that's really, I'm glad you brought that up. That's really nice too, because sometimes in a big thing, we notice the big thing and maybe all the little details of that we don't notice. So that's another way you can kind of savor, is like, it's so great to have this visit and hear his voice, and the sound of his voice was really a nice thing.
Yeah, I noticed all the ones that were popping into my mind were like doing something with somebody else, So
that's great. That for you, Sue, that might be a especially important component of your own savoring, is to savor the times that you get with other people, savor that connection. It doesn't matter what it is. Yeah, people are so important. Connection, that's an important reason of us being here together like this, right? Connection is such an important thing right now. So the idea behind this, I'll just mention quickly, it kind of comes from neuroscience and how our brains developed, and really developed to latch onto negative things, latch onto threats. I use the kind of joking analogy sometimes as, when we were all hunting in caves, we had to know which caves had the bears. In today's society, most of us don't encounter bears, yet we act like there's a bear in the room all the time, or a bear over there, or I'm going to run into the bear again. So our brains are kind of primed for that. It's called the negativity bias, and it takes effort to shift away from that, because we latch on to the negative things like Teflon, and the positive things, they're there, whether small or big, but they can slide off. It's like, that's more like a slip slide or a Teflon pan. They don't stick around. Did I say Teflon for the negative? I meant Velcro. Sometimes I get them reversed. So Velcro for the negative, Teflon for the positive. So what we want to do is try to reverse that process a little bit and make us, the resilience is kind of having a little bit more of a Teflon for negative, and also building our ability to kind of latch onto the positive a little bit. And that process of feeling it in your body can be part of it, is really just noticing that, wow, I have a smile on my face, I'm having a relaxed posture. That will help you with the savoring piece of it. So you'll notice that there's a lot of overlap to those three parts of the age: the arrival, where we used our senses; the gather, where we gathered attention inside and paid attention to what was going on in our body; and then the expand, where we noticed something specific, in this case, a specific good thing. They can be used separately. And if you do, you're probably kind of incorporating the others as well, or they can be used together. So we will finish, I will start a couple minutes in the guided relaxation. We're going to use the acronym STOP to do a visualization. But before we get to that, I want to do a little summary for anybody who does have to leave. Thank you, Dave. And just so you know, the older videos on my YouTube channel, at some point I was able to improve the sound, but the ones before around September are a lot better in headphones, because without headphones, the sound is a little bit more tricky. So when I think to what was most useful of you today, was it just one strategy? Was there something in particular that we did? Is there something that you're like, yeah, that was helpful, and that would be a way I could pause? We did all these strategies, we took a couple minutes to do each one. So it could be an easy pause that you take when you get to your office in the morning, or when you first get home in the evening, or end your day, or before you're transitioning to start a class. Finding a kind of a pause time for yourself and attaching it to something, maybe some regular part of your day, like eating or going to class, or even driving can be a great time to just open your senses to. You might not look around, but you can open your senses to what you're hearing, what you feel in that moment, or draw a pleasant memory to mind. So there are certainly times that we can do these things. I think finding times within your own day and saying, that's going to be my pause time, or just remember to take that time out and pause, can be really vital. I think of having like a toolkit of what works for you. So using these strategies, but if there are other ways that you've been successful in the past, maybe there's a time in your life that you felt pretty relaxed and at peace, and there was something that you were doing then, absolutely incorporate what's worked for you in the past. Kind of set an intention. Know that this absolutely is not selfish to focus on self-care. In fact, it's necessary. I think we try to teach that to our students. So really important to remember it for ourselves, that if we want to be helpers, educators, teachers, that we really, really need to be kind of restoking our own energy on a regular basis. And then the last thing I will say, and I'll see if anybody has any questions, is that finding these tiny little pauses daily is generally thought to be more beneficial than setting aside a longer time. So if you like to do yoga, and like, well, I'm going to go to yoga class on Saturday, that's wonderful. That also doesn't mean that, so from Monday to Saturday, I don't need to do any pausing or checking in. Doing that 1 or 2 minute pause or checking in throughout every day is really important and vital, even if we're doing the big things, working out, exercising, taking long walks on a more occasional basis. All right, so any questions about anything that we have done today before we move into the final visualization? Anything you want to ask me about what I have to offer, or what we tried, or how to tweak anything? All right. You're welcome, Taylor. So we will do the stop visualization. And again, you are welcome to go off camera for this, find a spot where you can be settled. You're always welcome to lie down for mindfulness practice. The only thing about lying down is you might fall asleep, right? And that's fine if what you need is rest and what you